Good morning, beautiful morning. And I want to start today with a question that is connected with this week's Torah portion of Lech Lecha. My question is, how did the Jewish faith, the father or the mother of all monotheistic faiths, begin? And in this week's Torah portion, there's a Midrash that describes the birth of Judaism with a cryptic parable. And I'm just going to bring up the Midrash here. I'm going to actually read the Midrash. I'll translate it for you. God said to Abraham, leave your land, your birthplace, and your father's house. We know that. We read that in the Torah portion. The Midrash continues. To what may this be compared? To a person who was traveling from place to place when they saw a palace in flames. They wondered, is it possible that the palace has no owner? The owner of the palace looked out and said, I am the owner of the palace. So Abraham, our father, said, is it possible that the world lacks a ruler? And God looked out and said to him, I am the ruler, the sovereign of the universe. That's the Midrash. Abraham. We have to talk about him. We call him the first Jew, or the first monotheist, really. His bewilderment is clear. This perceptive and sensitive human being gazes at a brilliantly structured universe, an extraordinary piece of art, this beautiful world. And he's stirred by the grandeur of sunset, by the miracle of childbirth. He's in awe of the respiratory system, of the bee dance when returning to the beehive from lunch. He marvels at the roaring ocean waves and at the silent, steady heartbeat of the human heart. He observes the ecosystem and the structure of the brain. And he's ecstatic. The world is a palace, but the palace is in flames. The world is full of violence, bloodshed, injustice, strife, liars, thugs, abusers, rapists, terrorists, killers. They're constantly demolishing the palace, destroying the royal inhabitants of the palace. Innocent people are hurt. Human life in many regions has no value. So I ask today, what happened to the owner of the palace? Abraham cries. Why does God allow a human to destroy God's majestic world? Why does God allow such a beautiful universe to go up in flames? Some people may say that God created the world and then abandoned it. But I ask, as I go through this, would anybody build a palace and then destroy it? Would anyone build a palace and then desert it? Some, I've heard, have very easy answers. Some say that the palace has no owner. The entire palace is a product of randomness. Others go the opposite extreme. They just deny the reality of evil. They say it's all a delusion. In the next world, it'll all be good. But Abraham, the first monotheist, the first Jew, He rejects both of these perspectives. Abraham knows that this world is a brilliant place, and he's perturbed to his core by the evil that he encounters. So, going back to the Midrash, the owner of the palace looked out and said, I am the owner of the palace. God looked out to Abraham and said, I'm the ruler, the sovereign of the universe. And the Midrash records God's reply. England's former chief rabbi, the late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, presented this compelling interpretation of God's response. I want to take it a little, shift it a bit. I want you to think about the fact that the owner of the palace does not make an attempt to get out of the burning building or to extinguish the flames. He's stating that he's the owner of the palace that's going up in smoke. If the palace is going up in smoke, why did he not leave it? It's as if instead of racing out, the owner is calling for help. God made the palace. We, humans, set it on fire. And only we, the humans, can put out the flames. Abraham asked God, where are you? And what does God say? I'm here. Where are you? We ask God, why did you abandon the world? And God asks us, why did you abandon me? And I think, if I can be so bold to say this, this begins the revolution of Judaism. This is the beginning, the genesis, in every way. Humanity's courageous venture to extinguish the flames of oppression, the flames of violence, and restore the world to the harmonious palace that it was intended to be. Abraham's encounter with God in the presence of a burning palace gave birth to the mission statement of Judaism. This is the mission statement: to be obsessed with good and horrified by evil. To be obsessed with good and horrified by evil. God created him an imperfect world, a world that is vulnerable to natural disasters, to viruses, to diseases, to all types of things. And of course, mostly to our destructive choices. But I think this too is part of our mission: to do what we can to preserve life, to protect the weak, to bring healing to the ill, and to bring protection to all. We can't allow political correctness, arrogance, misplaced compassion to cause harm to innocent people. For all too long, so many of us, the world at large, has succumbed to the lure of the popular notion that there's no such thing as absolute evil behavior. Thou shall not judge became the cherished motto. We've been taught that instead to probe, to understand the underlying frustrations that are compelling the aggressor to follow an extremist route. And I think that this sophisticated and open-minded point of view allowed us to sustain our ethos of tolerance, of accepting all forms of behavior. Since at the core of every mean act lies a crying heart. Few ideas have been rejected in the Torah with so much passion, because Judaism placed as its highest ideal the creation of a good and ethical world, the refusal to take a stand on what is wrong results in its victory, a non-judgmental view of someone who does a terrible, terrible act. Maybe it appeals to our sophistication, but in reality, it's a display of extreme cruelty to innocent victims who can die at the hands of frustrated humans. This is what I'm saying. Judaism, in its obsessive attempt to turn the world into an exquisite palace, created absolute universal standards for good and evil. What are those standards for good and evil? They are standards that are defined by the creator of the universe, that are articulated in God's manual for human living, the Torah. Taking the life of an innocent person is evil. But no buts, no ifs, no whys. The killer may be badly hurting, but that does not justify the evil of murdering an innocent human. I think tragically, we've become numb to our mission statement. For many years, leaders across the world, and in Israel as well, have displayed tolerance, neglecting our most cherished doctrine, the preservation of human life, that is supreme over every other consideration. And the results of our moral confusion, I think, have really resulted in a world that we see. No one's happy. This week, I had the opportunity to speak to the second-year medical students at a local university. And it's part of their medical ethics class. They bring in a couple of religious figures to talk about particular religious views on medical ethics. And the students asked, well, some of the questions were shocking and some of the questions were profound. And one of the questions they asked me, because I was actually the third in the series of 3 religious figures, so they had a context of other religions. Though I don't consider Judaism a religion, they had a context of other, whatever you want to call it, of their religions and us. And so they asked me, when it comes to medical ethics, how does Judaism differ? And I think this was Abraham's message. It's not by chance that I was asked to speak this week and not last week and not next week. We choose life over everything. Now, I'm going to give a caveat before I say that. We have laws. We have a Torah. For example, the Torah says God rested on Shabbat. We rest on Shabbat. And there's specific ramifications to how we rest on Shabbat within the framework of Jewish law. But we cherish life so much that you can break the most religious, most devout Jew can break every single law of Shabbat if there's even an inkling that we can save a life. That's how much we cherish life. Now, it's beautiful in some ways, but if you're a doctor, it's challenging. For example, and we got into a conversation about end of life, and we've spoken about it here as well. It becomes challenging because if you cherish life, it's not quality of life, It's not where in the world there's this idea of maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain. It's life that we cherish, not quality of life. It's life. And this is an incredible message that Abraham gave to the world. I really think that in recent years, the tide began to shift. We learned the hard way that, as Churchill put it, an appeaser is one who feeds a crocodile, hoping it will eat him last. The good people of the world are waiting to be inspired by our 4 millennium-long heritage of choosing life. And part of choosing life means standing up to evil and banishing it from God's palace. And this is part of, I think, what we think about when we decide who we choose as our leaders. Who's going to help our country and our world be safer? Who will be more likely to choose life? And we live in a world that's divisive, where the prophet says that there's going to come a time when the faces of leaders will be like the faces of dogs. And we don't live in a world of monarchs and of great leadership. We live in a world of simple people. And as a result, the Rebbe says that it's our responsibility to be leaders over ourselves first, and then leaders over our families and those that we have influence, and hopefully leaders over our communities and leaders over others. And it's very easy to lose hope. It's very easy to throw in the towel, as they say. It's very easy to say, we're way past that stage. We're not. Because we can always be leaders over ourselves. So often we pass the buck, thinking that leadership is somebody else. Leadership is us. That's what leadership is. The world may be such a connective place. Look at us here. But it's also more isolated than ever before. And that isolation actually has 2 sides to it. One of those sides is that we can be leaders over ourselves in a way that past generations couldn't. We truly can be the leaders. I think in this week's Torah portion, Abraham, who is a person who goes against one person. You want to talk about one person making a difference? Look at Abraham. The entire world thinks one way, and he's one person. And today, most of the world thinks like him. So you say we're too late? He could have said the same thing. It's too late. It's not too late. I think Abraham would ask us to reflect on the most critical questions facing us. How do we be leaders over ourselves? How do we create a world filled with kindness, filled with goodness, filled with justice? How do we construct a society based on moral responsibility? Our responsibility to make the palace beautiful. Abraham, I would imagine, would say one more thing. Don't get petty. Don't allow arrogance and fear to rule you. Do what you must. Do to the best of your ability, and trust that there is a creator, there is a God. I mean, if you don't believe in God, my gosh, I mean, there's no man that could have written this movie. And we have to trust that God is in control. And that was what the gift that Abraham gave us, the gift of monotheism, that you're not alone in this world. That when you're feeling all alone, when you're feeling sad, when you're feeling frustrated, when you're feeling isolated, there is a higher power. And all you have to do is tap into that. Be a leader over yourself and tap into the higher power. That is the legacy of Abraham. And Hashem should bless us all, that we should be able to go beyond what we see as the waves that are really just so large, the huge waves that are on the top of the surface of the ocean, and really find ourselves in the waters, the still waters beneath. Because that's where we need to be. The groundingness, the connectedness. And Hashem should bless us that we should have the strength and the perseverance to follow our ancestor, to follow our father, Abraham, and to do what is right in a very, very difficult and harsh world. With that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.